Everybody, welcome back to Van Halen Stories in episode number 39. Today, my guest is David Perry, all the way from, are you still in Los Angeles or Arcadia?
No, actually, I'm about 400 miles away in Benicia, California,
Okay.
which is in the Bay Area.
Okay. Wow.
It was the first capital of California. It's on the Carquinez Strait, so in between San Francisco, Sacramento.
Okay. So David has done a lot of things as a photographer, including Billy Gibbons' book from 2007, you said. Rock and roll, what was it?
Airhead.
Show that. Let's see it. Let's see that book. Gearhead. Everybody, you probably remember this book. That's why I wanted you to show it. Yeah, Rock and Roll Gearhead.
Yeah.
He did all the photography in this book with Billy and hung out with Billy and had some time with the master.
Bars and guitars.
That's amazing. Besides that, David grew up in Arcadia, California, in the Pasadena area, experienced Van Halen in their very early stages. And that's why we have him here today, talk all about Van Halen and his experiences around that and the Van Halen brothers and the culture of that area. That's one of the things that we've been talking about offline is just the culture of the area at the time. Kind of tell the audience basically how Pasadena was, kind of a little bit of history that you know that you just had kind of said to me, so that they understand the area in that period in the 70s.
Physically, yeah. Okay, so we're talking about the San Gabriel Valley, which is east of LA, kind of northeast of LA, and nestled up in the foothills. It's not the San Gabriel Valley, which gets all the valley credit. It's Pasadena, Eagle Rock, Arcadia, Monrovia, Temple City, Duarte, Rosemead, La Cañada, Sierra Madre.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's kind of its own world right there. Pasadena was our big city. It had the Civic Center and, the Rose Parade, all kinds of, big events. Arcadia, on the other hand, was a bedroom community. Beautiful houses, ranch houses. We had the Santa Anita racetrack, famous Art Deco racetrack, and the Arboretum, Lucky Baldwin's home with the Queen Anne cottage from Fantasy Island is there. It's a very nice, quaint, safe town. Boring, hot in the summer, smoggy, rain in the winter, not a whole lot of weather. It was I would say a boring place. So rock and roll was obviously an exciting thing. It was nice though. It's a nice valley, if you have to live there. I would live in Pasadena if I could afford it again.
Right.
But, I grew up in LA from the 60s on and just driving the freeways. You saw that. You were down there forever. That it wears on you.
Right.
And you got so much entertainment, which is great, but it's also kind of intimidating. You're seeing the best of the best in town. We had Hollywood, the Whiskey, the Starwood, the Roxy, so for some reason, when I grew up in Arcadia in the 70s, we were all kind of obsessed with guitar.
Would you say you're a Beatles kid or
yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely a Beatles kid. Yeah, I was born in 59. So in the 60s, I was listening to the Beatles. I was seeing the Beatle cartoons on TV.
Mm-hmm.
The first music I ever bought, I was probably 9 or 10. I bought Let It Be.
Yeah.
I bought a cassette and I played it. I didn't like it. So I returned it and got Led Zeppelin 2.
There you
go.
go.
This is what I want to hear. Before I moved to California, I lived with my grandparents, my mom, and my uncle, Uncle Lucky, who was 10 years older than me, class of 68. Okay. He had the Cream records. He had the first Black Sabbath album, which changed my life. He had the Zepp albums. He played me the Fish Cheer in his car. Don't let grandma hear this. So he was like the big brother with the rock and roll and a little bit of the hot rod thing, okay. Which I was just like, yeah, more of that. Yeah. So, and the main stations just played kind of the same stuff over and over. There wasn't a lot of way to find cool alternative music, though I did. There was a radio station, I think it was KMET, maybe, had a show called Over There that played imports. Okay. Imports is what's happening over in England.
Right.
The Scorpions, import, Judas Priest.
Mm-hmm.
I heard the Ripper he played the Ripper on this show, and he's like Judas Priest, and I thought he said Judith. I'm looking for this girl singer, Judith Priest. Is like, no. So that, you hunted for this music that, was that you liked.
Sure.
And we were very opinionated. We were very snobby.
Okay.
We had Aero shit. We didn't like, Aerosmith. We didn't like REO Speedwagon. We didn't like Bachman Turner Overdrive. Come on.
Right.
We like the heavy, dark stuff. And for
Right.
me, Van Halen was that.
Okay, so why do you think that was the gravitation for your group and for Van Halen in particular? They seem to gravitate exactly to the same kind of things that you are talking about.
Well, the first Black Sabbath album is so atmospheric, with the bells, and it's so dark. And you got to realize in the 70s, like Satanism was big.
Oh, really? Wow.
And we had the Satanic Bible as a paperback. It was even before the Satanic Panic in the 80s.
Okay.
They were playing records backwards, and oh yeah, there's something in there. It was just spooky horror stuff, It wasn't real, but I never understood how Black Sabbath wore like crosses. Like I thought you guys with the devil or you with Jesus, kind of flip flop.
Right.
They were called Earth or Rare Earth, and then Tony walked out and saw Black Sabbath the movie was playing, and he decided, hey, let's jump in on that trend. So I don't know how sincere it was, but it didn't matter. The first album for me too has that blues element.
Right.
And Bill Ward, who I had a chance to photograph later, was like an honor. He was like a swing drummer. You know what I mean? He had some really great chops, and that's probably what attracted all of us. So my Uncle Lucky was in California with my Aunt Val, and we got tickets to see Black Sabbath at the Hollywood Bowl.
Okay.
Which I don't know if you've ever been to the Hollywood Bowl. It's just amazing.
I've been by, but I've never been in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So it was Captain Beyond.
Yeah.
Never heard of them. Gentle Giant, kind of a prog rock band, and then Sabbath, right?
Yeah.
So we're way in the back, and way in the back. And I'm like 12 or 13 or something. I'm like, this is my first concert. I can't even see them. They're so far down there.
Right.
Captain Beyond killed it. I just became an instant fan. That's my music. That space rock, kind of weird riffs, and Gentle Giant played forever. Boring, totally boring prog rock. Sabbath plays finally, and it's probably like the Paranoid tour or something pretty early.
Yeah.
And Tony has like a cocaine overdose.
Oh,
and they only play like 4 songs or something, and he's gone. I'm like, all right. That was my big Sabbath, experience. But actually, I saw them again later. Another great show. It's at an Orange in some big field. Brownsville Station opened up. Cub Coda, he had that Destroyer. They were awesome. Peter Frampton played next, and he was recording the live album. We'd never heard of him.
Right.
I mean, Humble Pie was a little, before my time. Amazing guitarist.
Right.
Peter's like another world. Leonard Skinnard, the original band, and then Sabbath.
Wow.
So
that's quite a mix. That's quite a mix.
And by the end of the show, you're just like, what did I just? And they played a long time that show.
I was going to say, because I had just talked to Tris Mahaffey, who was out there, and mentioned Skinnard's influence and that people were really into Skinner at the time. He was.
Well, the Southern thing was huge in the 70s. You had the Dukes of Hazzard, you had, Green Acres before that, you had all the country fried stuff. Like we were really getting into our redneck aesthetic.
That's
wild.
We were all exposed to the similar things, like when the Beatles hit in '64, right?
Right. Everybody.
How that was such a big motivator for bands and moving forward, all of those bands, and they talk about Dave Clark 5 Van Halen does, how they saw them, I think on TV, right? I believe.
Yeah.
And that was like the thing, like I saw them myself in '82 on Don Kirshner's.
Yeah.
It was just like, when I saw that was the thing that motivated me. And for them
in concert, Don Kirshner's.
Right.
Then in concert was different though. That was simulcast on the radio, FM in stereo.
Wow.
I mean, that was as high tech as you could get at the time. And I had my reel to reel, my dad's reel to reel all set up. I'm going to record everything. And I think it was the Cal Jam where you got to see Deep Purple, Sabbath, um, who else? Black Oak, Arkansas was there,
All right.
right? You're hearing it in stereo.
Wow.
Like it was really building, but the live thing was what got me. In the 60s, Big Daddy Roth says kids got uninterested in hot rods in the 60s. He took the hot rod out of the garage, put the amps in, started bands.
Okay.
So he says the Beatles killed hot rodding.
Oh, wow.
The big fad before that.
Well, okay.
And it was true. Like everybody had a band. You'd hear bands in garages and stuff. I heard a band live of like guys my age in junior high at a dance. It was John Curry and Dennis Walsh, I think. They played like 8 songs over and over again. I think
Right.
Ball and Jack. I never heard that. But, it was live, had that sound. They were only a year older than me,
Right.
and they were tight. I'm like, wow, I could do that. I want to do that.
Yeah. So that whole culture that you guys grew up in with the, like it just became such a thing. So the Van Halen brothers are obviously caught up in this whole thing that you're discussing here.
Yeah.
Now, where do you go to school at in Arcadia at that period in the 60s?
So there's one high school, Arcadia High School.
Okay.
And when I got there, I went to Foothills Junior High School before that, and then I went to Arcadia High.
Right.
And we had like 3,000 students. I mean, you didn't see everybody ever, And I think that first year I didn't know anybody really. I just met a guy and ended up starting a band with him later because we both liked music.
Right.
But that was the sophomore homecoming, which is early in the year, right? September, October, something. And I started to hang out at the dances. We always had these 5th quarters, like after school dances. And I got to see a lot of live music. And I like to dance. So, I went meet some girls,
Sure.
This is what you do in high school.
Right.
So you see like professional bands and they play the Eagles and they play, good stuff. They got harmonies. It's cool. Wow, this is fun. But then the sophomore homecoming, which I don't know if they had more than one band or whatever, but Van Halen was going to play.
Yeah.
And I had seen some hotties around campus with these Van Halen baseball shirts. They probably made them themselves, like their groupies, right? I'm like,
Right.
So you were starting to see Van Halen. What a great name. They already sound great. I don't even know what they are, right? Oh, you don't know them? You got to see them. They're playing all right. So I go up in the bleachers when they're setting up finally. The place is packed. There were people there not from the school, just probably to see them who barged in.
Mm-hmm.
Dave's running around with his trench on. It's all dark. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be good. I hear a riff. He peels off something really just like a triplet or something. And it was just like a lightning bolt hit. This is all in the dark, right? They haven't played yet. I just heard one note. The tone, just everything. They finally started. He brought a spotlight, right? That was his thing also. We're going to bring a big floodlight, which is a great idea. Genius. Takes off the jacket. He's got the black and white striped pants on, right? They got the handmade on the bed sheet the Van Halen with the upper V and the A, and they sounded like a real band, right? I mean, they just blew my brains out. And the sound in a gymnasium, crazy. All of a sudden it's over. And I found out later from my friends, Jason Merriam, some dude put his cigarette out on the basketball court, so they canceled the whole thing, right?
Oh, Lord.
Because everybody smoked back then, Hey. So that was the end of that. And I don't know. I think I was just like, I was alone. I didn't have anyone to go, did you see that? That was amazing.
Right.
Asking around, and, they played again not long after that at the Masonic Temple.
Right. I've heard of this place. Yeah.
We're just kind of across the street from the high school and down a bit. And I was at that, I think, alone also. And he had the gold Les Paul.
Right.
And the blue crushed velvet suit.
Yeah.
And they were, and we're able to play their set. And, I don't think I got up that close, but it was like, wow, these guys are amazing,
Yeah.
But we saw a lot of other bands also. We saw, Eulogy played, Sky People, Joe Ramsey, Carl Hassey's had bands.
Mhm.
I'll talk about the guitar players who I hung out with later because
Okay.
that's kind of a part of it. But I'll go through the Van Halen. So after that, I think I had a band by the time I saw them at the International Casino, which was for me the best show because I got to sit right at his feet in a bowling alley. You know, it's a bowling alley. They're down where the pins are supposed to be. I don't know if they made a fake floor or whatever. Joe's band opened up, and then Sky People with Bruce from Wall of Voodoo and his
Right,
brother.
right.
They were amazing. I mean, space rock was huge. Space rock, I'm going to say Zol RX
Yeah. That's
band
yeah.
with the hair. I mean, when I saw them, I'm like, that's it. I love the showbiz, you know?
Right. I get
I
you.
mean, the playing is great, but for me personally, I was attracted, you know, to their showmanship
Sure.
and how pro they were. And even which I found out later, that's them pretending they're the roadies wearing their jumpsuits and stuff, and then they zip them out, which I use that later. I use that trick later. It's great.
Great trick.
But there were local bands. It was like party bands, you know, backyard party bands. And Arcadia's got a lot of really nice backyards.
Right.
And you've got some beautiful ranch house with a pool, and it's like Elvis Presley jailhouse rock. They're over there. You know, everyone's got their red beer, red cup beer, or it was just like a dirt field, you know. Cops were always showing up, helicopters breaking it up, you know, noise complaints.
That one place, Hamilton Park, is a place I went to up in Hastings Ranch. Sorry.
Oh yeah, Hastings, yeah.
Hastings Ranch. The Hamilton Park was one of those just open field, like you talk.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
when I went up there, I go, "This is where they played." And the
Right.
guys realized that yeah, they used to have these big things out here at this in this field.
They run an extension cord out in the middle of the football field, and you had like a 6-inch riser. I mean, it was hardly a stage, and you'd play. I'm like, God, it sounds weird out here, right? There's
Right.
nothing that pops off is out in the fields,
Right.
and we did not have amps. We didn't have anything that was like now. I mean, you played through whatever somebody had, maybe a Princeton, you know,
Mhm.
maybe a Twin. It was much later before we started to get like real amplifiers, you know. So we were all after that sound because sonically it was all there, all the records and the radio, you could hear it. Not everybody owned the same record, so you'd have to go hang out with your friend to hear the new Kiss album or ZZ Top album.
So you think this Marshall, the Marshall thing? You said Kiss because they were Marshalls, of course, but
We all knew that was it. That
so
was
you guys, but you guys weren't. You didn't have that locally. There wasn't much of that at all.
I eventually got one right around the end of high school. I got my Destroyer,
Yeah. Right.
which changed my life and changed my playing.
Right.
And I got Marshall 50-watt half stack with a slant. And dude, that thing, it sounded great, but we didn't have the thing he had. Eddie had to dial down so you played it in the closet. It just took over everything.
Right.
And then we would rehearse. I would rehearse with it in our studio against the carpeted wall, and it sounded great. But then live, I had to face this way. It was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Sound mixing was not all that tight, but yeah, we all wanted Marshalls, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the big discussions I just had about with Tris is that we were talking about his use of the Fenders early on, a Fender Bandmaster in particular that he played at a lot of those shows. You'll see it, and probably because of volume issues.
Yeah,
that we were discussing that. Of course, the Variac came a little later, I think.
yeah.
Where he was doing that. But do you remember anything about what he was playing through at the time? Do you remember seeing that stuff?
I don't. I imagine he had a Marshall slant, but a lot of this stuff was like kind of worn out, and you know they put speakers here and there.
Right.
There were a lot of custom amps at the time, the padded ones.
Sure, yeah.
There were Marshalls, but you know, we were in high school. We didn't know even where to get them. You know, I actually bought I think it was a blonde Fender Bassman, which I had heard were really great guitar amps.
Sure.
So I played one for a while, but you know, we didn't know what we were doing. We weren't soldering, you know, our guitars yet. It was just like another language. But you know, we poke screwdrivers around, try to figure it out. You know.
Right. I was going to say that thing where you're talking about the International Casino.
Yeah.
This is actually a real flyer from that show, one of those shows with the
Oh
sky,
my God. Yeah.
the sky
Wow.
people and all that. Can you see that? Let's see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. It was the only show I ever saw there. Where was it? DeWardy?
This is actually, yeah, this is International Casino in Dewarty. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Funky.
Is that the one you're
Yeah,
at?
that was the one.
This is
And
from this came through Doug Anderson, or let's see, Doug and then Carl.
Carl, yeah, because he played that. That's right. His
That's
band.
right.
Carl was one of my guitar god heroes too. He lived up the street. I knew him since junior high. And we were always friendly, but he was such a great player. And a lot of us, okay, so high school, now I'm starting to meet other guitar players. Jay Lansford, who played with Channel 3, I think, and he played with Steve Jones in The Stepmothers. I forget the name, but he went off to be, to work with our heroes. Our heroes were like Michael Schenker from UFO, Lee Roth from the Scorpions. That stuff blew our mind. And that was like a record. Van Halen you saw them live at the time. There wasn't anything to hear and dissect, and he wasn't tapping yet.
Sure.
So it was Michael Schenker, Lee Roth, Brian May. Early Queen stuff was dark, heavy. Bill Nelson from Bebop Deluxe. We were all obsessed with his playing. He was, a god. Tony Iommi, Richie Blackmore for me. Oh, so at the end of the high school show, Halen played. For some reason, I went up to the stage. I had to say something to this guy, and he's like, it's dark, and he's unplugging his stuff. And I went up to him all. I go, hi. I go, you're as good as Richie Blackmore. Right. He's like, oh, thanks, man. So I was like, I just had to say it. Like, I didn't know who this guy was. I just had to tell him, like, you are amazing. Right. I've never seen anybody in real life as talented as the people I worship, from TV and records. Right. So it was like, you knew right away they were in a different class. Though musically, punk rock was hitting big and they were like on their way out. So the fact that they got signed, we were like unsure. He became the atomic punk.
Right.
Because obviously he sees the Damned, the Pistols, the Ramones, all these bands kind of stealing their thunder, and they're still trying to play in these clubs, hanging on to this like rock and roll history and saving it basically.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's an interesting point to make, is that because of the movement, the punk movement, everything was, all that 70s rock was kind of like you said, it was gone, right?
We were anti-prog rock. And, I went to Yes, I saw ELP, I saw the prog rock stuff. I mean, they were amazing musicians, right?
Sure.
I saw Johnny Winter play boogie riffs for like 4 hours. My God, how many are there? I mean,
right.
We're able to see a lot of, really amazing players. And he talks about, Al Di Meola came out. He was monster. John McLaughlin, the jazz guy, super crazy. Sure. So we had seen like shredders, but there really wasn't a lot of rock shredders,
When you say that, I mean, this is something that I saw last night with Extreme, because this is first time I've seen Extreme in a while. And, I think the thing that Van Halen offered was the songs later on, anyway, the songs that had the guitar hero in them. It was kind of like the Jimmy Page of the.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there's the guys like McLaughlin and Di Meola, who were great players, but they didn't have the pop songs to go along with their chops.
Yeah. And I feel like I love them and I love seeing their success later, MTV, all this stuff. And I knew exactly, like, we're with Warner Brothers. We're writing pop songs with a great guitar riff in it, and that's all we need to do. And I don't know if I felt not betrayed, but like, oh man, they sold out or whatever. No, sure. I wouldn't say they did. But they lost that darkness. And you've probably heard some of the early tapes, they were trying to be Sabbathy, and it was all about his guitar playing, and Alex also, but you didn't really realize it, but it was like, he was such a force of nature that it didn't matter what they were playing or who the singer was, and David Lee Roth's great. listen to his podcasts. I totally get his shtick.
Right. So yeah.
His uncle ran Cafe Wah,
Right.
right? Famous old, Lenny Bruce played. He was showbiz. And he also had the side where, he liked funk, he liked disco, he liked lowriders, he
Right.
liked, Chicano culture, So he brought that. But I always thought his act was Jim Dandy,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Everybody said
Jim
that.
Mangrum. I mean, he'll even say that. Like he looked just like him,
Yeah.
whipping that blonde hair around. Yeah. So
Jim Danny said he came to a show and filmed everything. He asked him, "Could I film you? Can I film you?" And
just did it.
he just did it. He filmed him, performing, so he could kind of like figure out how to take some of that with him.
He shows that you can still be entertaining without having like the amazing chops.
Right.
I think for a lot of us who were very snobby at the time, we started loosening up. Like I liked the Sensational Alex Harvey Band.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with them?
I'm not.
Oh God. Zal Clemenson, one of the most amazing guitar players. And they were kind of a cover band who had albums and originals, but this Scottish singer creating these environments, with sound that were just amazing and stories but he wasn't a great singer, he could hit the notes. God, who else would be like that?
But yeah, there are lots of examples of showmen that have been, not your virtuoso singers,
I would say for me as a guitar player, Rick Nielsen changed me a lot because I saw them 3 times at the Whiskey, like right there before anybody knew who they were. And he was so entertaining as a guitar, bouncing picks off his guitar and flicking them. And, I'm like, and just a dork. Like, he's not cool. Where's his, cool hairstyle? Like, he didn't need it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, Robin and Tom, they're so I'm like, humor is great in rock and roll. And like Frank Zappa, obviously. There was a DJ in Los Angeles, Dr. Demento.
Yeah. This has been talked about a little bit here and there.
So he was in Pasadena at the PCC, and he had a show on Sunday nights, and it would just be like the most bizarre, comical, dumb music you ever heard. It was Mad Magazine, It's a Gas, where they burp in it. Pico and Sepulveda, just weird, Minnie the Moocher, Cab Calloway. Mm-hmm. So we would hear a lot of just goofy stuff that stuck with us. Right. I think Pasadena, for them also must have been a really good melting pot. We had Hoobah Records.
Right.
You could sell your records, and so you could buy a record for $2.99. That was normally, $10. Build your collection. Venues to play at, a couple, not that many, but a few. That's why we did the parties, the outdoor parties, because we didn't have any place to play, and we're underage, and they played everywhere. Band happenings, backyard parties.
That's one of the things I've discovered when I went down through the different neighborhoods was how well those neighborhoods, like you had mentioned a minute ago, how well those backyards and everything is laid out in such a friendly way to have a backyard party.
Oh, yeah.
It is. Long streets that you can park right down the streets. Miles.
They were great. I mean, that's what you did every Friday night. They'd pass around flyers at school where what was happening. You decided which one you were going to go to, and it's going to be broken up before it even gets started. Yeah. Plenty of parking. A lot of times a nice backyard. We weren't really trashing houses back then. We weren't going into, strangers' houses and, ripping stuff up. We were just, interested in the music and the band. So it was those and school dances. We had one every Friday night also, and I usually went to all of them just to see people play, and then started to realize later, there's a few places to play, but like they rented the venues. They probably rented Masonic Temple. There really wasn't a lot.
Masonic Temple, I think your dad even worked there at one time.
Oh, yeah?
At least, I mean, if that's the right one, it's the right Masonic
Probably how he got in, yeah.
I mean, are there more than one Masonic temples in that area?
Each city has its own.
But it probably is the same one that they played at. I would assume it was the same one.
Right. I saw them So I saw those three, and then I remember seeing them right as they signed and were about to leave and be famous. They played a few nights at the Whiskey, a
Gotcha.
Go-Go. Were you able to watch anyone there? Or
I mean, I did when I was in town. Yes. I mean, yeah, I've
favorite,
been there.
favorite venue ever? I mean, it's intimate. The sound's good. There's no age limit. I saw everybody there at the time.
Right.
So their show was mind blowing. You know, obviously it was like they were thrilled. They got signed. We'll be seeing you. Thanks for all the support. It felt like it was for us, you know, and they played a lot of their originals, you know, in a real club at the Whiskey. So,
Do you remember if that was New Year's Eve by chance?
I don't know. It might have been. It might have
70.
been.
There was a,
And
I want to say there was one, maybe it was 77 though, not going into 78. It
must
was,
have been
I think,
78 because I went to Cheap Trick New Year's 79 at Long Beach.
okay.
I don't know. We had to see him.
Yeah, but yeah, you know, when you mentioned Rick earlier, I was thinking about Eddie. Eddie met Rick later, and he loved Rick.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he was like, there was a thing
Yeah.
about Rick, and he still
It
has.
was such a comedian. You know, his whole thing with like he's playing a guitar and then it's the solo and they hand him another guitar and he just puts it on top of that. And then and then they hand him a third guitar. And like, we'd never seen anybody do anything like that.
Right.
You know, they were so polished when we saw them and nobody knew who they were. So it was like, you know, this intimate club, Bunny Carlos smoking the whole time. Like they were amazing. And it was basically just the first and second album. It wasn't the
Right.
Budokan yet. So
Right.
they played a lot of Move songs, you know,
Huh.
Roy Wizard, that kind of stuff. California Man. Yeah, it was super entertaining.
You mentioned Captain Beyond earlier. Van Halen played one of their songs. I forget which. I just
Dancing Madly Backwards or something, or
no. It was
Armsworth.
no. One of their ones with a lot of rhythmic, you know, time signature changes. I forget the name of the one, but
Their music was all that first record was like Bobby Caldwell, the drummer, was like from another planet and 5/8 time or whatever, just crazy rhythms. Rhino was Rhinoceros was in a band, Rhinoceros. He played kind of a bottleneck slide.
uh-huh.
Album is dedicated to Dwayne Allman. I'm like, that's weird. Lee Dorman from Iron Butterfly and the original singer from Deep Purple, the guy who sang Hush.
Yeah.
They were amazing. I mean, I've been like praising them forever. And everyone's like, I don't know, I've never heard of them. Like, you gotta listen to this stuff. It's so good.
Yeah.
So
Well, because I had heard about it through all the guests. I went back and listened to some of it, and I was amazed. It was really good. Production,
yeah,
the sound is great.
the sound is great, and I'm sure it had some amazing producer at the time.
The Van Halen brothers, you know, their feel and their time is what I'm trying to get at here with Captain Beyond, is that they were listening to these things with, you know, even Sabbath at times, right? There were different feels and time and
right.
like Bill Ward, you know,
Yes.
that they were picking up a lot of that, and then somehow they come out with this unique feel to the two of them. You know, that we if you've ever really got into the deeper cuts and ever tried to play into these songs, you realize how unique it is, how it is their own thing, and how difficult it is to emulate. I mean, obviously we can all kind of play You Really Got Me and we can play Ain't Talking About Love. But when you get into I'm the One or anything like that, you start to get these crazy rhythms and feels that they grew up on, that you're talking about these artists, you know, everything from Clapton to Yes to Scorpions to Captain Beyond. They're taking on all of these different things.
All of them. Yeah, exactly. And kind of moving away from like Clapton heavy blues, you know, it was darker. Like I know Sabbath had a blues background, but it didn't really sound like the blues. It had a harmonica. I mean, it really is a lot of that stuff on that first album, but we weren't that interested in the blues back then. It was kind of like, you know, we'd heard it for so long. We wanted some fresh, some heavy, dark, you know, Deep Purple, the Burn album.
Sure.
I mean, that was it.
Yeah, they played Purple live. They covered Purple, yeah.
Richie Blackmore just blew my mind. And, you know, I have a book called Stairway to Hell.
Okay.
And it's the 50 or the 100th heaviest records of all time.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen this book.
I
It's
haven't.
it's great. It reviews everybody really snarky though, and they just bagged on Richie Blackmore. Yeah, he plays those one string notes. I'm like, you try it, you
Right.
know.
Yeah,
He's
right. Well,
tasty.
he was
We
a
also were interested in things being tasty licks.
right,
We would make fun of anybody who played like too many notes. We'd go, it's just a cascade of meaningless notes, which
right.
I think a lot of his fans and players kind of became that in a way, and they
Sure.
all got really processed sound. Like I remember I saw one hair band one time at Gazzari's with my friend. It's just a sea of like hair,
Right.
ratted hair, and then the
Right.
band who also had ratted hair, and guitar through like this rack of computer stuff.
Right.
They all sounded, it was a good sound, but it was like compressed and limited and just, it wasn't it. It
Right. And,
wasn't he was after like his whole the Brown sound
right. Right.
and like it's in your hands.
Right. Right.
You know that.
Yeah.
Like for guitar play, even with Billy, I'm like, how do you get that sound? It's like, well, a lot of it's in his hands.
Yeah. I
Though
was
they
gonna, yeah. I was
play
gonna
through a
say
lot of weird stuff.
because you spent time with Billy Gibson's and Billy, obviously was a influence in that community because I mean a lot of people have told me that those ZZ Top albums were big for you guys. And obviously was for Van Halen. You had mentioned to me off camera that Hot for Teacher was obviously LaGrange. It is the same lick.
Oh yeah, and the same even the snare rim shots thing, but it's like a jacked up version of. But Lagrange. I mean, Lagrange is so great and perfect to even like imitate it and then do well is a real accomplishment.
Yeah, exactly.
That
Yeah.
song's amazing. The video's amazing. Dave's, he's driving the hot rod bus. I mean, it's all there.
Right.
ZZ brought back hot rods too,
Yeah, right.
right?
Right.
Eliminator and those early records before Recycler, whatever, when they went disco, which was
Yeah.
amazing. You could put that Texas shuffle over a disco beat. They had 3 beats, 3 shuffles. That was it. It's all, there's the full shuffle, the half shuffle, and whatever. But the sounds he would get out of his guitar, were just like no one heard it before.
Right.
Squonk. Brian May played with a
Sixpence, yeah.
Sixpence. So we were all after this very metallic sound. I remember I changed the nut on my. Oh, I have one to show you this. I
Sure.
have.
There it
It's,
is.
it's not my original.
But yeah, it's one of them.
My original was stolen, but
Right.
I was able to replace it 10 years ago on eBay. This is like a 75.
Yeah, right. That's the same era.
Um,
That's the same era as the Shark, which is the famous
yeah,
guitar,
they
right?
made him for 3 years. I got the white knobs because he had them
Right,
on
right,
his. Love
right.
that. I want to show you a picture of my band from high school.
Sure.
I mean, I was influenced by them, not so much the playing, but just the whole presence, right?
Right.
So here's my band, and you probably know the Van Halen shot
Yeah, sure.
ripping off.
Oh
These are
yeah.
my flash pots I made.
Right.
Here's the guitar with
That's
the
cool.
white red satin pants.
Wow, man. That's cool.
Neil Peart wore a Mercedes shirt, so that's why that's in. Platform Adidas.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all there. Uh,
That's one of the things, because you're as being a photographer and an artist in that side of the business too, is the visual aspect of Van Halen became this thing where they kind of transferred from the 70s glam vibe or whatever, and they kind of recreated a new look that
they
that
did.
that carries on through the 80s. They sort
They
of
completely did. And that was, I mean, it was probably Dave in a way,
right,
his mountain climbing and karate. And he was just like he was like Adventure Boy, like all over there. And they started wearing practical clothing for playing in, like Capezio shoes. Are you hip to those?
sure, yeah, yeah,
So I met Dave once. I worked at Warehouse Records in Eagle Rock, and it was kind of empty day. Little record store. He came in one day looking for something records, and he had on those yellow Capezios.
right,
It's a dance shoe,
right,
and they're really light and small. And I'm like, we were all just like, where'd you get those? We had the worst shoes in the '70s, dude. It was either platforms, from Hollywood that you couldn't walk in, but they were this tall. Well,
right,
we all got them. You see Van Halen in them. You see Sabbath in them. got to wear the big shoes. Then I got earth shoes, which were this horrible kind of reverse angle, like your toes were higher than your heel. So to actually see guys go, oh, that's a rock and roll shoe, I could wear those.
Right.
Probably changed everything and made them a lot more mobile, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Because, the story about them, there was a story in Noel Monk's book about when they go to Chicago for their first show and they're wearing the platform shoes. And apparently because it was they were shoved up on a stage in front of Montrose and Journey, they had no room. And apparently they were kind of like so apprehensive about these shoes and tripping that they were like, afterwards, the Warner's people or whoever, the management people were like, you got to do something.
You got to move.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when they changed their footwear.
Well, you saw Kiss, right?
Right.
And, they weren't the greatest musicians. It wasn't the greatest song. Showmanship blew our brains out. And, coordinated moves. They were doing it in the biggest platform shoes ever. So we felt like, all right, that's what we got. New York Dolls,
Sure.
That was that like transition. But yeah, the platforms had to go. They don't work.
Right. So their image, as they started to shoot with Niels Lozauer and all the different things that we saw as imagery across that first tour, and as it grew to 84. I mean, it's sort of like their clothing, the whole thing became a thing.
Yeah.
Beyond the music that subtly influenced all of us as player, like just the shoes, just being able to be comfortable, but yet look cool at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, as a rock god, guitar god, he had it all. He had the great hair, the great face, the smile, muscular, but not, wasn't a big guy. Looked like he was just having fun all the time. And we all wanted to be him, he tanned better than all the rest of us, they look good. And he wasn't even having to move around that much, at the time. Well, you couldn't, the stage was like this big,
right.
There really wasn't a lot of places to run around, but they knew how to be entertaining.
Sure.
Keep it going in between songs, the fights that would break out and you'd have to comment on them and get back to playing.
Right. Yeah. They had a confidence that they carried, too. Once they formed the Van Halen part of it anyway, from what I understand, once Roth got in there, he started to, like you said, kind of use all these different influences he had and ideas he had about showmanship and Alex, as in his new interviews that have been released, talks about how he used to get with Edward and say, look, man, you got to move around, you got to coach him on all that, and what's funny is when you watch Eddie say in the last tour he did, you think everything he does looks so like he would have done that from day one, but actually he didn't.
No, he changed his guitar style and his stage presence, really.
Right.
So all at the same time. And
did you see all that movement from like the early days where he didn't tap to when you said you saw before they went off and were famous. So you saw that evolution of the guitar playing especially towards the end. Did you notice, and this is something we talk about a lot with people, is how he kind of progressed very quickly in the last 6 months to a year. Did you see that?
Yeah, I think I'm sure he was tapping at the whiskey show because he already had the record deal and that was on the record.
Right.
I mean, we heard they got signed and you didn't really hear from them for a year or so or whatever. He came out with the Bomb. That was new with the Echoplex. Mm-hmm. Like everybody wanted an Echoplex.
Right.
They were really expensive. So by the time he had the Bomb and the Chain, and I don't think I ever saw him play with the Shark, maybe, but yeah, they definitely embraced a lot of the punk stuff though too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And made it their own.
Right. The stripes supposedly came from the Dills, the guy.
Oh yeah, right. And just like even the drums with the double kicks, right? I mean, nobody did that, but it looks great with the horns and they had sirens at the shows and anything for an effect.
Flash pots, like you said, your band.
Flash pots, right? That was a big thing, dude. we didn't know what we were doing.
I know,
But
right? All the
well,
fire
go get
stuff
some,
we used.
go get some gunpowder at the gun store. Okay, go in. I just need a little bit. I don't know how I figured out how to do it. I made one in my backyard. It was a coffee can on a piece of plywood, and it was an extension cord, and the plug had like the holes on the end. So I ran one little strain of copper wire between them. So when you hit a switch, it would arc out and ignite the flash pod.
Right.
Perfect. Tested it out in the backyard. Poof, amazing. We're playing a show, set them up, opening chord. It's a backyard party. Opening chord. I think we used to open up with Tie Your Mother Down, maybe.
Yeah.
Song.
Yeah.
Big explosion. All the power goes out. All the lights go out. Everything. There blew a fuse. Like, and then just dark. Oh man! Somebody go find the fuse box.
Right.
We used guys lighting them later by hand because we didn't want to blow out the fuses in the middle of our show.
Right.
The other effect was the Mole Richardson. Mole Richardson makes like big Clegg lights for Hollywood. They're like an old Hollywood Mole Richardson. They made a fog machine, and we'd all pass it around or whatever. And it was hot oil. You plugged it in, you waited for the light to like go off, and then you start pumping it, and it made smoke. Well, it's oil smoke. It's not dry ice.
Right.
And you're squirting it all over the stage because not all of it's getting out, and it doesn't stay low; it rises. I'm like, oh god, the thing, and then you can't see anything. So,
right.
But it was showbiz, and we were all fumbling around, trying to figure out showbiz. Right. And when it worked, it worked. Like I said, Sky People would bring TV screens with like static on them the whole time. Like we're getting transmission from Mars. I'm like, great.
Wow.
Whatever worked.
That's wild. That's wild because when even when I grew up, I saw Van Halen on Don Kirshner's, and I saw the 81 show, fair warning. And that progression of production, stage production, with Van Halen, all the way up to 84 with this massive production. Because I saw Billy Squier in 83, and it was a very sparse production.
Right.
Just a band with some lights. Foreigner the same way in the early 80s. But Van Halen had ramped that up to a major thing, and when I saw that video of Unchained, I was like, wow, look at that. That is really cool, because I'd seen Kiss, but even Kiss was almost a little step below that in production, which was unbelievable that they were,
Well, I think they probably looked at what ZZ Top was doing. I mean, he brought Buffalo on the stage, right? I mean, practice, and they'd recreate the whole tumbleweeds would blow across. Billy understands showbiz.
Right.
So he understands, it's time to do the dog and pony show or whatever. He knows how to entertain. And at the time, we didn't have the big screens either behind. You had to bring your binoculars, and the sound, there was a delay. Like if you saw a concert at the Forum or the Long Beach Arena, I mean, the sound was horrible in those places. They're basketball arenas.
Right.
It didn't sound good. There's a delay. For me, I really only enjoyed a band either at a club or a party or a dance where it's really intimate. I think once things started to get really big, they lost me. A bunch of my favorite bands get big, and then I kind of lost interest once they started playing arenas and stuff.
Right. Last night I saw Extreme, and I've always been a person who wants to be close to the action, because for me, the impact is so much stronger when you're not only, you're close and you're getting the visceral kind of thing too, that you're getting the club experience, but wherever you're at, arena, whatever, or a bigger venue. And there's just something about that. Even though I was kind of behind the PA and couldn't really hear it like you would out front, it was still much more visceral being right there in the thick of it.
To be able to watch a drummer, who's good and just what he does, and then the guitar player, and then to hear it as well. I mean, there's nothing like it. I have a son, he's 21 now, no interest in music whatsoever. It was always around, but it was like he never saw it the way we did. He didn't have his peers playing at the talent show at his school where he went, wow, I could do that. He was in high school band, but I said, is there anybody you want to see concert? We'll go. It's fun. We invited him to see Sophie Tucker. I don't know if you know them.
I've heard that name.
They're this duo. It's like electronic dance music, and a girl singer's kind of bossa nova, but great music anyway. Real dance poppy stuff. He's like, nah, I'm not that interested in seeing anybody live. I'm like, okay. So it was our generation because we didn't have all that stimo. You went out to see bands just, because you might be surprised, and we all saw 500 bands, probably forget most of them,
Right.
But we were in bands too. So we went to check them out. Johnny Ramone says he saw 500 bands before he decided what they were going to look like, how they were going to walk on the stage. And you realize, it's an act, besides the record, no one was recording anything, maybe a cassette recorder at the rehearsal. There was nothing, no Pro Tools, no, nothing, it was just, you're right there hearing it. And I don't know if we were even any good. There's no record of it. We might have been terrible, but
Right. It is an amazing difference between today's culture and that era. Even for me in the 80s, even as limited as TV was for me then, I only could see 4 channels on TV, and I was a 20-inch TV that was,
right. You sat right there.
I stood right in front of it. That's when I saw Van Halen, and I for somehow through a 20-inch TV, they just captured me, in a way that I'd never. That's why I'm here with you today. That's how
like the Beatles did through the AM radio. I mean,
Right.
You heard the opening Hard Day's Night. You're like, what's that? And then you saw them, and they were cute, tight. Everybody wanted to be the Beatles. You and your friends yucking it up, chicks chasing you, playing great songs. I mean, what else is there? That was it. We all wanted that. I didn't even have a career after I saw Eddie. I was just like, that's what I'm going to do. Maybe some version of that, but something. I was so obsessed with the guitar. And when I found friends who were also obsessed, who were probably better players than me, though I had the band, I actually got to go out play live, and that was the ultimate. You're better than me, but you're in your bedroom. No one's hearing you. You got no stage presence. I'm running around. I saw, you're doing stuff. So we pushed each other also. We inspired each other with music that not everyone had access like now. Hey, have you heard Roxy music? What? Look at these covers, man. Look at these guys are nuts. I guess it made it more special because it was more rare. It wasn't like now I can just pull up any song anytime. That's a great song. I could play it. How do you play this song? I find some guy on YouTube who's amazing at it, Oh, cool. And I'll learn stuff just for, like you said, to get inside the music. You want to know even more. Like, what's that chord? How does he play that? That's so cool. So,
yeah, I remember that when I sat down with my guitar teacher and I was wanting to learn, and he talking about love, just the riff. Because I thought it was just the coolest sounding thing, ever. Like that just really captured my need to learn it. I just had to know this thing, And there was there was the rarity too, that the lack of stimulation and different directions, and it was very communal too.
Like, he able to show you the riff?
Oh yeah, he did, but he was a Beatles guy.
Okay.
So
what's this?
The funny part was he showed it to me in a very weird position.
Right.
Which, like, I'll show you, because I put a video up and I said, nobody's ever played it like this except me. Most people play it in minor, right? Like that. Right? He showed me go like that.
Had to make it harder for you.
With no TV, unless I saw Eddie play that in front of me, I wouldn't have known where it was, right? So that's
why we went. A lot of times is to just, try to learn something. I heard he used to turn away and not let everyone see what he was playing. When I was learning guitar, the first thing I ever learned was my dad taught me Honky Tonk by Bill Doggett,
Mm-hmm.
You hear that?
Barely hear it, but yeah.
And so in order to learn songs, it's like you bought a guitar book and it was like Michael rowed the boat ashore. Like what? Like Jesus camp songs or something like that. That's not what I want to know.
Sure.
I bought a Black Sabbath songbook. That's not how you learn. It was like open D, open A. Like that's not what he's playing. And I don't
Right,
read
right, right.
notes. I don't read notes. So it was really hard to kind of get to understand it. You learn a bar chord, how to actually play a bar. Oh, that's a whole different thing. Well, every song we played had a bar chord. Suffragette City, Strutter by Kiss. You started figuring out these basic songs, bending some notes. Learning how to, just weird effect, bending the neck. We didn't have wang bars. You bend the neck down,
Mhm.
or you trill the string above the nut to get that like Sabbathy super. We were just learning as we went, and we'd all share whatever we knew with each other.
Yeah. That's kind of like, you hear the stories about Eddie and Kilgore that they were sharing all the time.
Oh
That's
yeah,
that's how they kind of like they had this synergy between them that people talk about. But they were just because they were together showing each other licks, and showing each
oh
other.
yeah, and they're like two guys in their own world. I mean, they're so beyond what everyone else is at. All you got is your friend who plays guitar, who's as good as you or maybe a little better. And you try. It was very competitive. I gotta say, and we were very judgmental of each other. So you felt the you were excited, you want to learn, but you also felt like, man, everyone's looking at me, to make this thing cool. It would be so easy now. You could buy digital delays for $100, buy a
Right.
Marshall for a couple $100. The guitars are, beautiful everywhere.
Yeah.
Actually, for me, I wanted to say guitar is still alive for me when I see inspired players.
Uh-huh.
They're usually like teenage girls on YouTube who
Yeah.
shred.
Uh-huh.
Like I would go see her live because
Right.
she's entertaining,
Right.
and they play all the rock stuff.
Right.
They went back and play the Van Halen stuff, Montrose, Judas Priest, whatever. Deep Purple. I heard a gal the other day play what was it? I want to say Burn or something by, she's smiling the whole time, just like killing it.
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
man, I never bothered learning solos. You did, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could play a note.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, that was like no fun.
Yeah. Right. It's like, because it depends on how what your win is, what you enjoy.
I wanted to say also, after hearing Van Halen, we all thought the idea was to be, the master guitar player. And after him, you're like, we're not going to reach that level. So we better find some other way to be entertaining. So for me, it was like Rick Nelson, Cheap Trick. I got into power pop bands in the 80s. There were still guitar players around a little bit, but not as much. I mean, he was the shredder, besides all the hair bands, right?
Sure.
Who came out, Motley Crue and Rat, Poison, and all that stuff. But for me, it was like they were just trying to be them.
Sure.
Like that was the prototype. They do it better than everybody else.
Right.
And that's all I really want to hear. Because there was so much other stuff happening when they launched in what, 80, 79?
78 for Van Halen. Yeah.
Right. You had the whole punk thing. You had new wave, new romantic, reggae came back, disco was out, but there's a lot of other sounds and still guitar guys, the
Mhm.
Jam, the Smiths, Johnny Marr, great guitar player,
Mhm.
who weren't playing the rock and roll style, but you were still like, oh yeah, they haven't completely eliminated guitars yet,
Sure. Right. 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 And it's still not gone. There, like you said, there's young women who are embracing guitar, all genres, all eras,
Yes.
and young
Guitars and drummers. Yeah.
and young guys that are still doing doing that. I'm friends with a lot of people in the different forums and stuff for Van Halen, and I'll see much 20-year-old guys that are really getting these things down.
That's
And
exciting.
it is exciting to see that
Because
continue.
most people have moved way beyond any of that. But
Right.
the guitar player is going to see something like we went back and looked at, everybody before us. We didn't have to, see them live, we'd hear Django or Cliff Gallup, great, rockabilly, Scotty Moore,
Yeah.
Hendrix, and all that stuff.
Of course.
But yeah, it's great to see it with the kids, and I would see them. I think it's a young person's music. Really, there's so much energy they have. That's what you want a piece of. I don't really want to see a 80-year-old guitar player. I don't want to see Ted Nugent. He's lost a couple steps. I have seen Ted Nugent when he was young and famous, and then now, and it's like, dude, you've lost the step. We don't need any more, Wango Tango. You can have a seat. Let the kids play.
Yeah. I mean, when you did see him in the 70s, which I've only seen a few good clips of him in the 70s in his prime, he was
so good. When he had a singer before, like Stranglehold and that stuff, we played that stuff. It was amazing.
Yeah. He was a monster in the early days, man. Like I think I saw one of the festival shows on a video, just one song maybe, and it might have been Stranglehold. And man, the energy and power of that, of a young Ted Nugent was something to see. And Van Halen too, if you see some of these early videos that have been popping out of Van Halen 78, 79, that are actually getting to the point now where the quality is really good. You're finally seeing them kind of in their early days when you saw kind of like that first version of them that was so powerful and young. And
I think they picked up the ball from like the older rock bands. I want to say like Deep Purple and Sabbath, who were probably getting into some drug problems. The bands were splitting up and they were playing different things. This was like a revival version, just amped up a little higher. Which we needed them to like save bad music because everything else was not that. It's kind of, I felt the same with Guns N' Roses. Like I was still in LA, and every time I had the radio on, it was Welcome to the Jungle. But great song, great riffs. Slash again, like kind of revitalized like that guitar god thing. And he's still, I mean, his stuff is still great.
Yeah, that was that switch, in the early 90s where you was kind of waning with the hair metal. It was kind of starting to fall a little bit. And then Guns N' Roses came along and they were this like fresh, new, heavy,
dirty.
Right.
Like just effed up Sunset Boulevard, street trash. And the hair bands were all getting to be a little too perfumey, costumey, all the same. Couldn't really tell one from them. So I think that opened up them bringing it back into being a raw kind of nasty thing again, which it killed it. They killed it.
Right. It was there was that thing that because Van Halen had been so successful, everybody wanted to be that. They wanted to do what they did. And I mean, that makes sense. I mean, obviously we're all inspired by people like Van Halen, but then there's only so many originals, there's the ones you think about the bands who are still playing from that era, the Journeys or Def Leppards or whoever's left. They were the originals of their time. And Van Halen was an original of their time. And those people, I mean, some of the other bands are still playing gigs, not anything big, but the ones that are still playing the high level shows were the original guys,
And they're still writing good music. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to flip back to ZZ for a second. They made a record called Rhythm Mean. Have you heard this?
I haven't heard it.
Oh my! The guitar sound is so good, and he does this one song called "Loaded," where it sounds like his chord is cutting out on him. I'm like, how did you do that? He's all, well, we recorded it on a micro cassette, and then we took out the cassette, we blended, and then we wound it back in and used that. It's like when you're playing and your amp's starting to like short out. He put that in the song and controlled it. You will love it. You have to find a copy. It's called Rhythm Mean.
Okay.
So he's still fresh, still making like new sounds, still playing the same, format. Three guys, shuffle beat, but like he stayed up with disco. He had, disco beats. Now it's kind of electronic music, back into the blues again. you know,
Always reinventing himself. That's kind of like,
and staying in there, right? When you think, they're old, they're out of it, he can't do it anymore. I actually, I like to see them old and playing because they already had the beards, they already looked old, you know? It's
right,
not like you're trying to, like, Kiss is having a hologram.
right,
They're showing, which is great. They should, because
right.
they're old for doing that. You know, they might bust a hip or something, you know, and we need so much more stimulus. So, yeah, IMAX it, 3D. Why not? Why not?
Sure, yeah. I was just at the Spear. I didn't go to the
Oh,
show,
yeah.
but I got to walk around the building and see it at night. Yeah, and it's just a amazing thing that when you go back as far as what we're talking about back in the 70s, 60s, and now you see this, it's like that's such an amazing uh, path that happened with media and video and photography and everything that is art.
We wanted to do that. I mean, we had laserium at the planetarium. You would stand in line, smoke a joint, go inside, and they would play Pink Floyd and have like laser show where they used to have the planetarium.
Yeah, right.
And that was like, wow, man, that's trippy. Like we were just up for any kind of sparkly something or another, you know. It was a pretty, it was a pretty dull time actually visually, except what you saw on the street, you know. And even that was you had to hunt for it. You had to know where to find it.
The Hollywood scene in the late 70s. What do you remember about it?
Okay, so I was able to, after high school, work at a health food store in Melrose, and then later at a studio for photography. But I was near the whiskey, so I could run up at lunch, buy tickets for whatever was happening at that show. I went to mainly the whiskey, occasionally the Starwood.
Okay.
Starwood was a pit, horrible, smelled like bum piss, and it was all crowded. And I never really liked it. The whiskey, on the other hand, I loved.
Okay.
It had a floor ceiling, lots of space. I saw the Ramones there. I saw Blondie open up for the Ramones. I saw Judas Priest there before anybody knew who they were. Got right up on the stage with I actually had a camera at the time. Rob Halford had like a Caesar haircut. He didn't have the long hair. He didn't have the short hair.
Yeah.
He didn't have the beard. He had a white pirate shirt. But they killed. They were so good. It was just like the right place to see bands, so many that went through there. But for me, it was more like the English stuff, the Jam, maybe Madness. Who else did we see at the time back then? Elvis Costello played at the Whiskey. There was all this kind of Devo played there. You get to see these bands who also went off and got really famous right after, usually. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was it. Like once they got famous, I wasn't as interested in them. I was looking for the next thing, maybe.
Right.
But it was cheap. I mean, the whiskey was only like a few bucks, there was no booze. We were all underage, and they started to have talent nights or punk nights, I think, on Sundays. So we'd see the Quick, the Dickies, the Monk, all these like LA bands just popped up out of nowhere. And a lot of them were really good players in different styles. They weren't shredders, but they had kind of interesting guitars and the humor thing was big. Right. I mean, the Dickies, Manny Moe and Jack, and, it was just like anything goes.
Right.
We weren't trying to be serious, Sabbath guys anymore. We were just like, I'm going to wear this stupid t-shirts,
Right.
Got at the thrift store.
So Arcadia, in Pasadena, I noticed this when I was traveling back and forth between there and Hollywood. It's not really that far a drive. I mean, it's like 15, 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, I mean,
on a good day.
I'm in the town over, so you had to like go through Pasadena. It was probably 20 minutes, and then down the Pasadena freeway, and then across. It was a drive. And me and my friends, my friend had the car. He had a Datsun B210, little fast little rocket thing, and me and the punks or whoever we were hanging out with would all pile in the car. We'd stop at Bob's Beef Burger with our Coke and ice and add some rum, under that. Fritos and bean dip all the way to Hollywood because it was a drive right on the freeway. Right. And by the time we got there, we had our buzz on because we were, because they did have alcohol inside. We were underage.
Right.
And we'd find some parking by the apartments or whatever, down the hill and then stumble in, watch the show,
Right.
go home. Like once a week at least, maybe more than that. And then the Starwood, Punks had their own scene. They had the Mask. Yeah, it's got to be like a lot of places, to see bands, different bands. Yeah, it was, you felt like, this is the place.
Okay.
Big.
Yeah.
And
The Starwood, being that it was where they were discovered, that was kind of where Templeman and Mo Austin came in there and saw them.
yeah,
You said it was dark and dingy, and
I didn't really find it to be a very attractive venue. The ceiling was low. It had like a disco and like these just kind of ugly rooms, all these little rooms off to the side. And they were in this one room. I don't think I ever saw anyone there where I felt like, wow, that was a great show.
okay,
Like, I don't think I went there that much. It was just a different venue. It didn't have the same vibe as the Whiskey for whatever reason.
right,
We also had the Roxy,
yeah,
which is a beautiful theater too, just up the street.
right.
But we didn't see a lot there because the Roxy would have like the Rocky Horror Show play for like a year, and so you could see that, but it wasn't like bands in and out all the time.
Okay.
That was Whiskey. And then later Pasadena would have Pookie's, I think Carl mentioned. It was a sandwich shop by day and Joe made it a venue at night. There was the Ice House Comedy Store. There was the Palace in Pasadena, which is a nice big venue, so you can see, larger bands there. So yeah, I guess there was still like a lot of stuff to see. We didn't really run out of venues.
Yeah.
But I stopped really seeing that stuff by the time I started art school because I was so immersed in being a photographer. I'm like, music's great. I moved to San Francisco with my drummer, thought we could make it up there. Didn't. Came back, just auditioning other players always and never found anybody. And finally I'm just like, I gotta do something. So I decided like art school, go back to college, get a real job and all that. So I sort of stopped really playing and listening. I did have a band though. I had a rockabilly band that
cool.
played for fun. I wasn't even trying. And we got more gigs with that band than any of the ones where I was trying. I'm like, all right, this is fun. 3 chords, you know where it goes.
Isn't that wild? Like, some things just like Van Halen, they kind of just naturally evolve and they don't try, like you said, try too hard. I mean, they did try, obviously, but their evolution was sort of like these, amazing evolutions that just kind of happened for them, being able to find the right people like
I think
Mike Anthony being there at that show where they blew the PA up and they just found this guy.
They were a gang though. I mean, we would like form a band, play one gig, then we'd all break up. That sucked. You suck. Start another band, play one gig. They had played everywhere for years. They were so tight. And Alex and Edward, were connected, I guess. So yeah, I mean, you almost think like you could just throw out any song and they would just play. If they didn't know it, they'd know it. They'd play it and it'd blow your brains like you'd never heard that version of that song so well done.
That's what everybody said. Everybody said they did the songs. Obviously they redid things like "You Really Got Me," which is kind of a window into how Van Halen songs when you were there. That it's so much, at least for me, was such a evolution of that song when you listen to the original. And if you're hearing Van Halen cover these songs back then and they're doing all their songs like that, I'm thinking these guys are
now that they played like another song, like a cover song, because they were a cover band.
Right.
I was always like, why would they do that song? But I understand now.
Sure.
But at the time it was like, okay, yeah. I remember they played Firehouse by Kiss, which is a really simple riff and a simple guitar. And Eddie just like made it this whole other thing. Still retained the song though.
Yeah.
You start to realize like you don't have to write the song to make it good. You can almost do a better version of a song, because it's the Van Halen version. You want to hear the Van Halen version of "You Really Got Me." Or you want to hear them do Ohio Players or Kiss, anything. But they had played with each other so long that you could see it. It's like we all wanted that. And it's rehearsing and playing live, a lot.
Right.
And I didn't have that in my early days, but later I did because we were kind of the house band at this bar. And, you really get the hang of playing live, but, all
Sure.
in your ear and it gets old.
Yeah, yeah. The house band thing is something I've done over the years, and it really does help you. Like if they were playing guitars on a regular basis, which they did, right?
Yeah.
Really helps you solidify your show, get some regular work, and practicing in your bedroom or practicing in a garage. It's there's a whole nother part that you learn when you're in an environment with people and you're
Oh,
having to
yeah.
work them every night and you're having to
Yeah.
deal with that every night. You're trying to succeed and keep your job there every night. There's a whole learning that goes on with that the Van Halen's got a chance to do.
Yes.
Struggle of finding the right combination is a struggle. It really is. And they were really lucky in that it had a lot of combinations like all of us did, where they went through lots of different variations of players. And Alex's new interview, it kind of goes through who that was. And when you find out how many they went through, it's like, he couldn't even remember all the singers that they had.
I'm sure, because
Right.
everybody wants to be a star and it's about, we can't have anybody, bringing us down because you don't got the look or you don't got the, you felt the Beatle presence so much. Like you had to be like a gang and y'all got along and you joked around with each other, and it's great. And there's nothing like it. It's like, these are your brothers, and you're playing in all kinds of, hostile environments or whatever. So
That
yeah,
is a magic time, though, for like a band like Van Halen, that the magic time probably, and they probably look back at it now. I don't, with all the success they had, they probably think of their early years as their magic time when they were all on the same team, they were moving towards a goal, and then when they achieve that goal, that's when things kind of spin out of control and
right,
they lose what they
right.
had between each other and overall, it's painful in a way because they had done such, from what you saw, were so
Yeah,
dominant and so great that everybody in that town and the towns all around your town, Arcadia, Pasadena,
yeah,
see them
yeah,
running everywhere,
yeah,
Pinata, they were just a force there.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It was like you witnessed this meteor. What I thought was interesting about the record, though, is they were able to capture that live energy in the recording of like, and I realized it later of like, they're the ultimate California party band. And I'm sure when you saw them, Montrose probably looked at his fingers the whole time. They came out and just blew everybody away sonically, visually, and then left. How do you follow that? I wouldn't have wanted to, right?
Yeah.
But I think they captured that sound on that record and that energy of like, hey, it's a California backyard party, which, the rest of the world hadn't seen that yet. They
True.
were in LA with us kind of incubating it, learning out, how to make it from their little hand done banner to having, like you have the beautiful logo, Warner
Right.
Brothers, Money No Object, we're going to make you guys big, of course. Um, Helmut Newton shot them,
Right.
which they're like, what's this guy doing? Those are great photos, by the way.
Oh yeah, the
So
ones that were so controversial with Dave and
yeah,
then
but they're like, oh, we can't, man. That's too weird.
right,
Um,
right.
Dave knew though, Dave knew about that aspect. I think that,
Sure he
show.
did. Sure he did.
Uh,
That was the thing about Dave, though, and still is about Dave, is that he's worldly in a way. He wanted to go and see and do and learn. That's something that's just inherent in his personality. I mean, for all his kind of communicational, Eddie used to say we could just throw him in a room and he would talk to people, and then when he left, they wouldn't know what he said, but they were dazzling. Like he dazzled them. And he was
yeah,
that's what that's what he does. That's why we have him. He actually embraced this part of Dave early on.
yeah. Finally figured out that was the thing.
It was an
Yeah.
important part of
Have
their
you heard his podcast at all?
I have, yeah.
He
Yeah.
talks about kayaking through the medieval canals in Kyoto, Japan at night and just like his adventures, I don't know, nobody's doing that.
Yeah, it's amazing because somebody said it was Tom Broderick who was on here a while back. Tom was one of those first soundmen they had in Pasadena. And Tom said when they went on the first tour that Dave was afraid of heights.
Mm. Oh
That he
God.
wouldn't even come up to the window in about an 80-story building they were in Chicago. And he said, and then a number of years later on his solo album, he's on the side of a mountain,
Oh, I know.
right?
Some of that.
So Roth is just, he's a learner. He's somebody who's just into that, and I think that there was that, there was a social thing with the brothers and Roth and like you said, San Marino versus where they lived, not that far physically really, but I guess from a, they came over with nothing,
Yeah.
and dad's working, these odd jobs as janitorial staff and whatever. And of course, Mr. Roth, and they're living in that monster mansion and they're practicing over there.
Yeah.
It's such a thing with that. Do you remember the neighborhoods? I mean, was Pasadena fairly middle class throughout, or how was it?
It had some poor, it had the bungalows that were more like middle class working, and then you had like mansions,
Right.
like the original railroaders. Huntington had the Huntington Library, which was his home. I mean, it's like dynasty mansions. So there's that in there also. That's the weird thing about LA. Once you get on the west side, it's just all money. Like once you get past the 405 or whatever, 605, you're in like West LA, Beverly Hills, Hollywood. It's just money. Everything's $1 million or 2 million. So the Valley still had, regular working class stiffs.
Sure.
Like
Because that's the thing about Pasadena that I didn't know from that layout in that area at that time, how, because like you said, because the Van Halens are a perfect example of this. They have this little bungalow that they live in, right?
Right.
And they're in this area. It's a very beautiful place to stay. It's gorgeous, and wonderful. And then of course there's the super rich, not far away.
Right.
With
And you want to play in their backyards.
right, which
they got kids who are like, dude, we're gonna get Van Halen to play at my birthday party. My friend, actually, I have a friend, photographer, and his wife, he told me she hired Van Halen to play at her 16th birthday party. And they played. So you could hire them to play at your party. She probably had enough money to whatever the fee was. And, can you imagine?
Yeah, but that's cool for them because they had this opportunity to play all these places, and
there's money, a lot of money there,
and they could experience all the different people in their different lives, and they could learn, they're kind of growing up in all of this and absorbing all of this,
Right. Well, and that's how the Beatles got to be so great, was they had, solidified in Hamburg, playing cover songs and getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And by the time they hit, they were completely formed.
Sure.
Sure.
That 10,000 hours.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's just a thing. Like yesterday, I was talking to one of my guys, and I was saying, somebody, I don't know, the 10,000 hours thing is a thing, but it usually, from what I can tell anyway, it takes about 10 years for anything to develop to a like a mass, like Van Halen, for instance. When you think about how long it actually took them to become the 1978 Van Halen, that goes back to 72 or the 60s when they start jamming with people. That's a long time. That's a 10 to 15 year period of growth that happens in those backyard parties and the small clubs.
You have to, yeah, that's where it all happens. I think all that really great formula stuff is, you see what works with an audience, what doesn't, when to play this song. You got to just do it, because the audience is, if you're unknown, they don't care. They want to be entertained. So you got to figure out how to be entertaining. You got to wear flash clothes, have lighting, some effect, some gimmick. And they understood that, and I think I learned a lot of just how they went about their business. Like I said, him wearing the jacket over his outfit, like not revealing his flash yet, little how you walk on the stage, how you present your act, it all mattered. and we studied all that stuff. And I'm sure everyone else who you met, obviously you studied from them because they're going places. They're going to be the next big, we all knew that. It's exciting though, seeing when they finally went out in the world, like you saw them, Greg finally saw them, like you didn't know who they were. You hadn't seen that energy. To see them just blow up in your face, with that music and the sound, but it must have been like a religious experience like we had.
It was, not only on Kirshner, but in '84 when I saw them when they came through, the first time I got to see them live.
That's what I mean. Yeah. 84. God,
Yeah, that was a heck of an introduction. And what was so sad was that it was over after that. I was like, oh, what is going on? I just kind of like discovered the band in '82 or whatever.
Were you a player by then in '84?
I started right after I saw them on TV.
Really?
I started playing. Yeah, I was like, I got to play.
You didn't even have a guitar? You just
no, man. I don't know what it was about seeing that. I had seen Kiss before '79.
Oh yeah.
And I'll say this: if I talk to Gene Simmons, I'll say this. I couldn't see myself being Kiss. But when I saw Van Halen, I saw this party,
right?
And this
I could be in that.
I could do something like that. I may not be him, but I can go have fun playing music.
Yeah, it's almost like when you see Kiss or you see Van Halen, it's like, okay, you guys are that, so I'm not going to try to be that. I got to find my thing,
right?
My sound. And I realize like all my favorite guitar players, I know their sound from like one note. And I've got 30, 40 people I love their playing,
Right.
Right. But they have that distinctness that's probably in the fingers, not as much in the notes they play.
Sure.
And the sound, because we were always aware of the sound because records ruled and hi-fi was great and everybody had big speakers. So we knew it was possible. But how do you make that in your bedroom? How does he get that sound? I know he was always searching for that sound, and he had to actually get out the soldering gun and the screwdriver and, tinker around to make it how he wanted it to be. But, I mean, we didn't know. We didn't know.
But the journey to learning, how he got the sound and how he learned how he got. I mean, he didn't know what he was doing, but he was trying to figure it out. I
think he knew what he wanted, though.
He did.
He just got to figure out how to do it.
Right.
Get it. And he talks about Dow Hi-Fi where he bought the parts. I went there. That was an amazing place. It was just like transistor. Like, I don't know what this stuff is. Some old guys. Pasadena is filled with tech engineers. JPL is there.
Yeah.
Parsons, there's some like big techie stuff there. Right. NASA has a office there. So a lot of nerds, a lot of like super smart guys. Caltech.
Yeah, right.
Sure. I mean, that's genius central. I mean, if you wanted to get anything done, it was possible because there was a shop in Pasadena. It was somebody who knew. So I'm sure he went in there and, I mean, it's such a simple idea too. And It was by accident. He had an English amp.
That was 220. That was 220 or whatever. And then
we didn't know anything about amps, guitars. We tried when we get our screwdrivers out and start plunking around, changing the pickups for DiMarzios, whatever, to try to get that edge, that more metallic sound, more sustained, more sustained, more feedback.
Right. Right.
God, if I had this stuff now, it would have just been it would have been too easy now, really, just with the guitars and the amps, the effects that are available, like everything you ever wanted.
Yeah, you think about that. How Eddie Van Halen influenced the whole culture of guitar now, and the amps that we know, and the artists that are out today with multi-string guitars with the more metallic, distorted sound this really tight sound that he had.
Yeah,
he was always going for it. And he got on the first album that became something that defined guitar in the rock genre. And today you hear it across even the more proggy guitar players. They're all kind of referencing this tone that he was working on it that you guys were all working on at the same time, trying to get that
I have a theory though, and I just thought of
Yeah.
this the other day. Okay, so we all grew up with like drag racing, dragsters, funny cars, and the sound of either cackling motors is a very Alex Van Halen, drum sound, and speeding cars is very much his sound also. And
Mhm.
we heard that all the time. There were drag strips everywhere. They were hot rodders. He hot rodded his guitar. You didn't just drive it stock. You pop stuff off, and I could make this thing go faster, better, louder. So, Dave has his 50 Merc. Have you seen
Mhm.
this?
Yeah.
I mean, that's like money car. That is like top of the line. He got the right car, the right year, did all the right mods on it. Van Halen was into. He had a Lamborghini
Mhm.
Mira. He
Yeah.
loved. I mean, so I think they heard the motor sounds a lot, and
Mhm.
that probably influenced the tone. Like they knew they wanted something that replicated the power of these cars, these dragsters.
Right.
'Cause
Right.
that was another serial
Eddie would say
experience.
that. Eddie would say that. He would say like, I treat it what he was talk about. He would refer to racing a lot when he was talking about his guitars and gear being able to take high performance.
Right, right. It's got to be able to last the whole show and not fall apart. Right.
Right. So he was always making that connection between something that he was making, he was modding, like you're saying, modding, drag, hot rodding and modding,
Yeah.
and
Modifying it. Yeah.
all of this was sort of a mentality of you could make it you could build it if you didn't have it, you could create,
Right.
you could create.
Right. It's interesting. A lot of the guys who I played with in high school became luthiers
Right.
and really got into the building guitars. Actually, Spencer was making wooden guitars in wood shop in high school, and it was like, I'm just going to go buy one. I don't
Right.
really want to do that. But it was the feeling of like, we got to modify this. I had a friend, Brian Zybus, who had a Fender neck, and he sanded this thing all the way down so you could push your finger through and see the truss rod, gutter, because he wanted the slimmest neck possible. He'd be out there sanding this thing down like, people started to modify this stuff.
Yeah. I think
I
about your
had
guitar. I think about your destroyer, the destroyer in particular has a thinner neck than a
yeah,
floor. When I
it
got,
changed my playing entirely. That guitar, when I
yeah,
finally got it, I'm like, I sounded good, I looked good, it wasn't out of tune. I mean, it really was like this power object that changed how I played and probably how he played. Also, it's like, they're light, they're beautiful. They were sued by Gibson for being
dude,
too perfect of
right,
a color.
right,
Uh,
right, right,
but they totally looked space age, space rock, like
right.
everybody doing space rock had to have an Ibanez destroyer. After mine was stolen, I went out and bought I think it was a Dean,
Uh-huh.
same shape, but it had like a V-neck.
Right.
Horrible guitar,
Yeah.
horrible. Weighed a ton. It's like a coffee table. It was just
Right.
like I never regained that magic I had from that guitar until I replaced it, years later for a lot more money. And went, yeah, because I played a lot of stuff since. Like, this is it. This is my guitar, and I'm sure for him it was the same way. Plus, it wasn't a precious thing for him. He'd cut it up, take it out. It wasn't like a precious object.
Right.
It was a tool.
Painted it a lot, and he did a lot of things.
Painted it, yeah. Which
Yeah.
we were so into like the sacredness of an instrument. Like, who would do that? Well, if he does it, it's okay.
Right.
Obviously, it's got his reasons.
That's
You know?
funny because I got to play Chris Holmes's guitar, which is the same, was bought a day or a few days apart, maybe even the same day as Eddie's Shark in the same shop at Sound Chamber in
Yeah,
Pasadena. And first thing I noticed was the neck profile,
yeah,
how thinner it was, and I was
yeah.
like, wow, okay, because this is the guitar he borrowed for Women and Children First when
Right.
he had wanted to use Chris's, and Chris had modded it. It's painted red, it was that same natural finish you have, but they all
Yeah.
painted them, right?
Yeah, right. Because it had to look, had to match my outfit or whatever. I
Right,
can't
right, right.
same as him. Yeah,
That's
that's
wild.
fine.
Those things are very, very valuable now. I mean, I think
They are. I
everybody's
saw
got.
one go for like $11,000. I mean, I paid like $300 for it at the
I
time,
know that's right. That's crazy, right?
and here's my thought. I mean, it's one of the heartbreaks of my life losing that guitar, but my hopes are it got sold and it ended up in some famous rock star's collection and he made great music with it, you
Sure.
know? So
Sure.
I feel like it's a great guitar. I'm sure it ended up in someone's hands, even though, it was mine. Had my name, dude. I had a silver piece made with my name
Oh yeah.
engraved right here. I had the nut was silver. We filed it out ourselves. Like we were modding stuff, early on. So I figure it's probably still out there. They probably popped out my name tag because they didn't want to, see, but they only made so many.
That's right. I have to tell you this in episode 2, the second episode I did. I was a friend of mine who went on to play with the band called Brother Kane, and he ended up in Alice Cooper's band, and then Thin Lizzy, and now he's with Skinner out there. And he had one of these, right? He had the same guitar you have, and he tried to put a Floyd Rose in it back when that was happening, and it was too shallow,
Right.
and he ruined it.
Oh
Ruined
God.
it. And it's so bad he ruined it so bad he just left it at the shop.
Oh shit.
So 20 some odd, 25 years later, the guy from the shop brings it to him and says, "Hey man, I found your old guitar. You want it. You want the body because it was still in our shop." And he said, "Yeah, I guess." And so he gave it to a guy. Said that, I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, man. It's ruined. And the guy said, "Let me see it." He's a woodworker guy that did woodworking and paint. And the guy brought it to him totally restored with the block. The whole thing looks brand new.
Oh my God. That's so cool.
And he even put a little thing under the clear coat on the neck that says "Long live the king," and it has the logo. And he shows it in his video when we're
That's cool.
and it's a beautiful guitar, and I got to see it in person not long after that. And man, I tell you what, I've had a few of those in my hands. They're great guitars.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. They really are. I've the only other thing I have a Dan Electro DC 59 or whatever, the Jimmy Page one.
Cashmere.
Yeah, I love that guitar too.
Yeah,
And that was like $300 mail order. I didn't even play it, you know? I mean, we didn't really discuss guitar possibilities around us, but there was a store called Guitar Center. No, I'm sorry, Guitar Corner,
okay.
right up the street from me. And it had two guys who ran it, brothers, Paul and Tom, and they had a band called Body English that
Okay.
were all steps. And they were a little older, than us, but it was right 2 blocks away from me. I could go down, play a guitar, talk to these guitar guys, other people wander in. Like to have a local music store was huge. We didn't have to go to Hollywood, Guitar Center, some of the big places. We had one right in our neighborhood, so I think that helped us a lot, having a place to go and hang out with other musicians. You could have lessons if you wanted.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's a big part. I mean, I worked in a music store when I was in my 20s,
Oh yeah.
and the connections and the people that come in and out all day long, this guy that I was just telling you about was one of our regulars. He would come in and he was the Van Halen guy. He was the guy who knew all the licks before we could see it on anything. He figured them all out. Right. So I knew him as that, and so that connection, those connections we made in that neighborhood and our
Yeah.
store was,
Yeah.
it was
And
so,
it probably had a message board for other,
yeah,
players.
sure,
I
yeah.
think we found everyone in the recycler. There was a free, it wasn't free. The ads were free, but you had to buy it. There'd always be like ads in the back for bands. So I'm sure that's how we found anybody, to play with or audition with. Yeah, a lot of that.
Yeah, the music store we just hang out in. People will walk in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I'd be working and I hear some bass player in there. I thought, well, that guy's pretty good.
right.
But,
You get
hey man, are you playing with anybody? And that's how we would sometimes form bands. We'd meet people and
That's great.
you
Yeah.
get to kind of hear them audition before they
Right. Without having to audition.
even
Yeah.
audition them, right? It was cool that way. Yeah, that's awesome. Man, I appreciate you coming on and talking to me today, man.
Sure, man. I know you've spoken with some guys who really knew him much better than I, but
Well,
we were all there.
it's such an important thing to know a broad sense of what was going on there. That's why when I talked to you, I know you didn't feel like you could add anything, but I think you add a lot, with all of the different, you're talking about the environment what headspace you guys were in at that period in that part of the world. Who knew that you guys were in the Southern Rock? I mean,
Southern California, they identified with the South in the Civil War. I mean, they're totally into,
that's
the
wow.
country part, the redneck side. Yeah, we got a lot of that. And that was the style back in the 70s. It was like full on America,
Right,
we loved
right,
it.
right on.
And we had like surf culture and hot rods and Hollywood, but that seemed more like earthy and real. And we liked the music. A lot of the bands were from the South. So,
Yeah,
uh,
it's interesting though that it permeated in California, like California permeated where we were.
right.
Because Alabama and this area where I live, we were always getting West Coast culture a few years behind.
Yeah.
And
Well, I saw that with skateboard culture, right? I mean,
yeah.
Thrash Magazine, which is up in my area, um, kind of spawned this whole nation just from a magazine.
Sure.
People watching guys, doing crazy stuff. They all wanted to be California skateboarders. Same thing. For us, though, we liked outside bands more than local bands because they were from some other place with a whole other style. And I always felt like if you were from like Athens, Georgia, or Minneapolis, you're kind of isolated. You're going to make something original.
Sure.
You're not going to Hollywood every week and seeing the best of the best and going, well, where do I fit in?
Sure.
In a way, if you're isolated that way, you're able to actually make something really interesting and fresh.
Right.
And then you go to LA, because that's where the business is.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of bands from LA that really made it.
Yeah.
Actually, the big band at the time I wanted to mention, try to get as many names in there. The band Smile.
Sure.
Tommy Gervin.
Yeah, Tommy's one guy I've been trying to get. He works.
Tommy went off to play with Eddie Money.
That's right.
But he was a great guitar player, great hair, great sound. They were kind of Stonesy, Rod Stewarty. When I finally started studying music at PCC, he was in my music theory class. So we sit playing our little electric pianos, right? And he had these shoes, these white shoes that they were platform. I'm like, man, where'd you get those? These all nurses' shoes.
Oh,
Like we were looking for, like we had to wear girls' clothing, to be glam. There wasn't guy stuff like that. So, like, where'd you get those shoes? Nurses' shoes. So they feel great. I got a little lift in them.
Did you study
They
under?
never made it though. Smile.
Yeah, I know. And Tommy, Tommy's working for Goo Goo Dolls. He's part of their trucking company, or he's
really?
drives trucks for them. Yeah. I've been having a hard time getting him because he's always on the road with them.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because I do want to get him, but
It'd be a good interview, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I was going to say, PCC. I just met the daughter of Dr. Fisher, Truman Fisher, who was one of the PCC music department people. Did you study?
I don't remember who the teacher was. I took a couple classes and then I had to drop out, but one of them was, music appreciation. Another one was music theory. It might have been him. Yeah. If I saw him, like he probably taught all of us, right?
Yeah. He was Eddie's teacher and Alex's teacher.
There was a couple schools. Okay, so I took one class of improv at the Dick Grove School of Jazz Guitar, or whatever, in the Valley.
Okay.
There was that, and this is all before GIT.
Yeah.
The Guitar Institute. So when I was a photographer, I would be working in Hollywood. I'd see these guys with their soft cases.
Right.
Like all of a sudden, it was like Eddie Van Halen's everywhere, right?
Exactly.
And they cranked out these guys who knew all this stuff and were amazing, but it wasn't him.
There's only one Eddie Van Halen, right?
But, they saw the market and they're like, we gotta teach thousands of people to play like that. So
right. That's just amazing because I was actually accepted to GIT, but I never came out and lived there. But yeah, like you said, isolation though often is a plus in creativity. Eddie would say at one point he stopped listening to outside music in order to kind of.
Yeah, he said that he didn't really listen to a lot of anyone else's stuff, really.
Because we know he did early on, but
right, yeah. But that's interesting. I mean, there's so many bands from these odd places where you just wonder, and it's the influence. And the South, obviously, musically, such a rich history.
Sure.
I've only been, the closest I've been is I went and I photographed Southern culture on the skids.
Okay.
in their studio in Roanoke, and they're amazing. He's an amazing guitar player. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not.
Oh, it's a trio from the South. They did a record, Dirt Track Date, in the 90s. Real swampy guitar. Like he'll
Okay.
play with 2 amps with the tremolo at different settings,
Right. Right.
stereo, and you'll like them. I think you would like them.
That's pretty
Second Culture
cool.
on the Skids, kind of a 90s band, I guess.
Yeah.
But the history, obviously
Oh
of
yeah, the Delta Blues and the whole,
the Delta Blue, yeah, the
I mean,
pilgrimage, and everyone wants to make the pilgrimage.
right, right. I always want to go down to Clarksdale because I mean I've been over there, but I didn't do any, deep research to kind of. I didn't go to the crossroads or any of that, but I worked over in that area at one point, and I never did get down and actually do the blues trail or any of that.
Oh
Although
yeah,
there's some really cool things you can do down there that way.
yeah,
Morgan Freeman owns a club down there, and has been a big patron to that movement and trying to
yeah.
keep it going and all that. So yeah, anytime that you're a guitar player or any discipline that there's a history, you want to kind of go back and learn.
To the source, like you did.
Sure.
Like you
Sure.
want to be in the same place where they were, even if it's not like, if even if they aren't there now, like they were here, it happened here. It does. It adds this thing, this element. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Uh,
when I came out there to the neighborhoods last time I stayed in an Airbnb in Pasadena, like 30 seconds from the Van Halen. I lived in the neighborhood for a few days, you know what I mean? And I went all around the neighborhoods, and I know Sierra Madre, and I went to the guitar store. Well, what was the guitar store at 50 West Sierra Madre where he got
yeah,
the
right.
top, and so the neighborhoods, I have a visual now. I have a very visual memory of those places that you guys grew up in, and it's does add some kind of context for me that I never had.
Yes. Let me ask you, it was very familiar though from watching TV for so long and everything's shot in LA.
Sure.
That when you're actually there, you're like, oh yeah, this looks familiar.
Sure.
Like if you're in New York, it'd be the same thing. You've seen enough movies about, you get the feel when you're actually there. It's like, oh yeah, it is like this.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Like,
true. I did have a lot of in my head visual ideas of
you
what.
think of all those like the Rockford Files shot on location. And then they shot in Pasadena probably for change. I mean, there was always some movie crew somewhere doing something.
Yeah,
So,
it's one of the funny things is one of the first places I ran across that was a movie site in Pasadena was the Gamble House,
oh, dude, that's my favorite house in the world.
which is the freaking Back to the Future Doc Brown.
Yeah, right. Before that, actually, I met this guy Randall Mackinson, who was the curator, and I was working at a bank at the time, and he's like, "Yeah, I there's this house you got to see. It's the ultimate bungalow made, with the best craftsmanship." And I thought wood was dumb. I'm like, "Yeah, wood paneling," I didn't really get it. So I went and saw the house, and it blew my mind. Just everything about it. And I got the tour from the curator, this older man who was like, knew everything. He let me photograph in that house from art school projects. He had me shoot a bunch of other green and greens in the area. So I became obsessed. These guys are genius. When you see quality like that, it changes you, right? It's
Sure.
like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible.
Right.
But this thing's amazing. And then it ends up in Back to the Future,
Right. Right. Which
which it's great. I love that. Yeah, that place. And you went in there. You saw the house.
I didn't go
Yeah,
inside that day, but we were in the neighborhood going down to the Rose Bowl
yeah,
right on the way.
yeah.
And
My art school's up there. You go up,
okay.
and the art center, which is like this Bauhaus, like monolithic building that spans a bridge, is just up from the Rose Bowl.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
very interesting history there.
Yeah, you could go to Pasadena and just do all other things besides Van Halen and just enjoy yourself. It's got
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
different, the culture around there and the vibes and all the different things you could do are
It really does have everything except the beach. If it
right,
had a beach, it'd be perfect.
right.
So
But it'd be way more expensive.
it'd be way more expensive and probably the wrong kind of people there. I want to say about the guitars also.
Yeah.
I had a chance to work with Fender Custom for a while, Mike
Okay.
Eldred.
Yeah, Mike Elton. Yeah, sure.
and toured the factory in Corona.
Right.
But I ended up at the place where they had all the necks for all the artists, like Clapton's neck and Neil Young, and they all had their own perfectly. So they would have to match that.
Right.
Like they decide this is the neck I want. So anything for me, like the level of tuning it up for the artist, like we just if it fit off the rack, that was great.
Right.
But to think you could actually modify this even more.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I actually won a contest in the early 90s to have a guitar built by hand at Yamaha's custom shop over in North Hollywood.
Oh wow.
And that was what we did. They not only sat down with me and we designed every aspect of the woods and the finishes. In fact, I took Eddie Van Halen's Purple Music Man was my color match, and we fashioned a custom guitar. And in that process, there was a neck shaping point where I came back out for a second thing with them, and we sat down and they sanded it to what I wanted.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and it was, and I still have it. And it's one of those things where it's such a one-off hand built,
Yeah.
even though it's the shape of one of their normal guitars. That guitar is a one-off that's, hand shaped to me, built for me.
And there's still a guy working the sander, and I mean, it's not
Totally, man.
Yeah, it's
Totally.
still.
This is one.
I was blown away. I'm like, there are so many guitars now. I mean, you go to like a music store, and it's just walls and walls. There's so many that stuff I lust after still.
Sure.
It's like there was so limited back in the 70s of like a decent guitar. There were a lot of cheap ones, but Ibanez was it. But Gibson's, the Les Paul got really heavy and kind of not fun to play.
Right.
I never really hooked into Stratocasters or Tellys at the time.
Right.
Flying V, I love the Flying V. There was an Ibanez that, but Gibsons were just out of the range. So now I lust after the St. Vincent guitar.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And then there's a Fender Meteora, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Two like great space rock guitars, right?
Sure.
I mean, you can totally see Zolarex with those,
Right.
So there's still stuff that that's out there, but so much more for the average guy, right? Because even a guitar for children I saw, it's like 3 strings and it's a learner guitar. I'm like, that's great.
That is great. The manufacturing and the ability to do that on a fairly easily, built, but quality that you can actually play, because like we said earlier, how hard those early guitars were
and they were discouraging. If you didn't,
of course.
If you're hurting your fingers and the action's too high, I'm like, I don't know how you do this.
Yeah.
And then you play something that's actually set up and you're like, oh God, I don't have to work so hard.
Yeah, that's one of the other things Eddie probably did. He probably at least inspired people towards performance. Like we said that, right? And that performance is partially how a guitar plays and how it's set up and how, because he would say that the easier the better. I didn't want to fight my guitar.
Right.
Right. And I think we all had that, especially if we grew up in that era and had those starter guitars that were so bad that we all learned right off the bat that that's such an impediment to your ability to be inspired and continue forward.
Yeah. And you want that special guitar. And the funny thing is, everybody had their favorite guitar stolen, right? Frampton's Black Beauty that got stolen. I think Joe Perry had one stolen. It's like, it's just a part of music. You're going to have your guitar stolen or broken at the airport or something.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate you hanging out with me, man. And
nice talking with you. Yeah,
we have been on here for like a couple hours, and it's gone.
Hours, yeah. Well.
It's gone by like that, man. That's the sign of a great conversation, man. I really appreciate you spending time. It's great to meet you, man.
Yeah, you too.
It's such a wild thing that I get to do to find someone like you online and be able to just connect with you. And then, all the people that I've connected with on this thing have turned out to be guys that I've loved and I've kept up with.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things where you get to spend some quality time with somebody, and it really does something for you.
It's like, if we were just sitting around having a beer, we'd be having the same conversation. And I have bored my wife to death with these stories, you know,
That's
because
right.
for her, it's all ancient history. And she's like, but, you figure out, well, we have to make it interesting a little bit.
Well, I tell you
So
what, people do care, and they want to hear these stories, and I appreciate you sharing those.
I want to hear the stories, and I
Right.
saw this is number 39. You've got 39 of these.
Yeah,
Damn.
39, man. Yeah,
All right.
amazing, right? I keep on going. So I'm just going to keep going until people don't talk anymore, but I don't think that's going to be anytime soon.
That's kind of why I became a photographer, because it
Yeah.
was like this passport into worlds that I wouldn't normally be allowed into. And
Yeah.
once you're in and they trust you, they just open up, and you're in their world. I mean, I've been in places I would never be access if I wasn't, a photographer. So I tried to apply everything I learned from music in my photography. And I like when I made my hot rod book, I was playing Reverend Horton Heat in the background all the time and ZZ Top. When I made my Border Town book, I was playing Calexico and mariachi music. It's like, Tom Waits, trying to get that thing I hear as a photographer. And most of them don't really work that way,
Hmm.
but because that was my background, it was more like the atmosphere. You know what I mean? Showbiz. And when I had exhibits, same thing. You got to dazzle them. You can't just hang a bunch of pictures on the wall. You got to have sounds and bring a car in and, make it a big multimedia event. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
learned all that from watching these bands back in the day and just, learning the business, showbiz, entertainment.
Right. Right. And like you said, if you're not open to doing something like you're doing photography, there's a world that you're not going to be part of that you could have gotten to be a part of and enriched your life just by like we were talking about with Roth, how he was open to these other things in his life and was
Oh,
able
yeah.
to go down all these avenues. He's still a rock star. He'll
Yeah.
always be known as David Lee Roth. But
Totally.
the learning and the interaction with other people is really the magic of what we do.
I think that's what they ultimately learn also is they start out wanting to be famous and rich and being, popular and their music's important. But eventually you're like, God, I saw the world. These guys, toured the world. I was able to have a show in Japan, show in Germany. Like I would have never been able to go, but my art allowed me in there, you
Sure.
know? So,
Sure.
and I always had some music to kind of support the art also. The hot rod stuff has its own music. There's some great old weird hot rod stuff from the 60s and 70s. So it's more of like the whole thing, the whole
Yeah.
event,
I
you
think
know.
that's, by sharing this with other people, the things that you and I both been opened up to by going down a path and then finding out, wow, like with Van Halen, they were able to go down this path. And like you said, their world expanded in a way that they probably never even thought of. They might have been just so much focused on being famous and, getting a record deal or whatever. But then they realized how much their life was enriched by just making the steps.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a limited thing. Like the Beatles, made so much great stuff and then they just had to leave and go solo. And I'm sure for them also the tension of a band being stuck with these clowns, day in and day out. And I'm sure they fought like all of us, you're gonna play that. That's horrible, whatever. But you're also having this amazing experience, 5 years, maybe 10 years for most bands, I think, if they're lucky.
Sure.
Only a few last all the way without any problems.
Right.
But
Yeah. It's just,
yeah,
but it's all about learning. And I think that's,
it is.
if
It
you're
is.
even if you're arguing with the people you're with, there's a thing going on there where you're
You're
learning.
learning how to negotiate and how to be like, who really has the power. And yeah,
Right. And how to,
and you still pulled it off.
right.
Even with all that cash, you made records, you sold records, you entertained people, you blew them away. That's all that matters. They're
Right.
left with that, feeling of, the show, seeing it. I'm sure when you saw somebody that great live, it's like a religious experience.
Sure. Sure. Last night was like that. It was one of those
I
things.
bet.
I dive into it. I know they're a great band. I've seen them once before, but I wasn't like this up front and be able to, when I'm up front, I don't have anybody in my way. I can see clearly. I'm not being distracted by any. It's like I'm in my own TV show, and I'm just
Right, right. There for
I,
you.
I'm just there by myself with the band, and I'm
Yeah,
blown away. And
yeah.
that
It's
is the kind of impact that I enjoy, and just thrive to have that moment where I can then go the next day and go, I really need to work on this, or I need to work on that. They can do it. They've done it. They're
Right.
healthy. They're vibrant. They're out there changing the world, and there's no reason that I can't do that tomorrow. That's kind of like even in the bigger scheme of things.
Yeah. And I feel that with a lot of music now. Like my tastes are completely broad now. I listen to all kinds of stuff. Still go back, and hear some of the classics. But the last band I saw probably before the pandemic was Daka Braka.
Okay.
They're a Ukrainian band. It's like three women and a guy.
Okay.
He plays accordion. There's a drummer. There's a cellist and a piano player. Amazing. I mean, you don't understand. It's in Ukrainian, but the harmonies, the rhythms, it's kind of got some rap in it. Beautiful stuff. From another side of the world, another language, but still has that essence of that we love in music.
Sure. Yeah.
Like they're living it, and I can feel it. And to see them live, they were so good. It's just like, wow.
Right.
I'm glad I'm a photographer.
it just picks you up, makes you feel good, makes you want to go do things.
We listen to music pretty much every day around here. We have to. We got to just find something, or we're singing it, in our head. What's that? Like my wife, I heard her singing some obscure Ultravox song the other day. I'm like, were you singing Ultravox? She's all, I don't know, was I? Well, yeah, you were singing from their first record that nobody knows. But you play it around the house long enough, and those hooks stick.
That's right, man. Well, thanks for being on, man. I appreciate it. And you stay in touch with me. And
I will. And if you're ever out in Northern California and want to swing by, look me up.
All right. I appreciate that.
It's expensive out here, but
I've been up there once. So yeah, I will definitely look you up. And thank you for being on and being guest number 39 on Van Halen.
Right. I love it. I love the number.
David Perry. Show your book again. Is that Billy Gibbons' book still out there?
I'm going to flash a few.
Show what you got.
These are all from like 2000. No, I'm sorry, from 97 to like 2007. There's the
Billy book. Okay.
Gibbons. Here, let me pop this up so I can see.
It's good.
Rock and Roll Gearhead.
Yeah,
my first hot rod pinup book. Awesome. Girls and Cars. Come on, we love this. Fantastic.
Yeah.
No one's done that. My first book, which was like my debut record, it's a black and white hot rod culture. And here's another hot rod pinups 2. And there's one other book I don't have handy, Border Town. But yeah, they're out there on eBay, but not new. I mean, I think they're all.
But nowadays you can get anything. I can get crazy. Yeah. I still can get Crazy from the Heat by David Lee Roth online.
Yeah, and the things I've gotten from those books I would have never have gotten, on my own. It's like people see the book and they want that for their project. I worked for Harley Davidson. I worked for Custom Chrome. I did Corvette. Just we want that feel. So all right, and the money's obscene. Advertising, if you sell a song, it should be obscene. You should make so much money.
Right.
All right.
Thank you, David.
You too.
Have a great day. All right, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.